Welcome back to the channel. We're hating on Disney again, I'm afraid. A lot of people seem to be misreporting this. And all of their tweets, I've been reading so many tweets, everyone's like, "Ah, Sony, it's your fault, Sony." Wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone that's always so adamant that, you know, Disney is this massive corporation, seemingly quick to turn on Sony. When if you actually look at this report right here, my boys, it's Disney's fault. So let's get into it. What am I talking about? I'm of course talking about Spider-Man is out of the MCU. Amazingly. Yeah, that's right. He is out of the MCU. Now, I won't touch on the updated response first. We'll talk about the initial report, because that's what everyone was discussing first. That was the that was the clincher of it all, right? So, and this is where the misinformation is coming from, because there is massive misinformation. So, anyway, Marvel Studios President Kevin Feige won't produce any further Spider-Man films because of an inability by Disney and Sony Pictures to reach new terms. And I don't understand why everyone was so quick to blame Sony. Yeah, they don't do, you know, they're not particularly great, and they have had their fair share of missteps in their time. God knows they do. But this is also Disney we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Disney and Sony trying to make a deal. Disney, the hugely greedy corporation. Disney, the company that has recently been accused of cooking its books. Disney. Why are we so quick to blame Sony? So they couldn't reach new terms that would have given the former a co-financing stake going forwards. A dispute that has taken place over the past few months at the top of Disney and Sony has essentially nixed Feige and the future involvement of Marvel and the Spider-Man universe, sources said. And although this says sources, this is now confirmed because we have a response from Sony. This comes at a time when the last two films Kevin Feige produced broke all-time records. Disney's Avengers Endgame became the highest grossing film of all time, and Spider-Man Far From Home this week surpassed the James Bond film Skyfall to become the all-time highest grossing film for Sony Pictures. Sony want them back on board. Disney are at fault here. Sources said there are 2 more Spider-Man films in the works, and the studio hopes to have director John Watts and Tom Holland front and centre, though Watts doesn't have a deal for the next picture and isn't a lock to return. That isn't helped by the fact that unless something dramatic happens, Feige won't be the lead creative producer of those pictures. And I think this will be really interesting, because Feige was obviously the lead producer, right? Now, he has established the Sony Spider-Man universe, right? He's established it. So it'll be interesting to see whether Sony is capable of replicating the aesthetic that was established and the tone and the themes moving forwards, because this is also something that Disney will have soon. Feige's not going to be working for Disney forever. And if Sony, this is kind of an interesting almost case study. If Sony is able to replicate it moving forwards, and the success moving forwards, then it doesn't matter. And this will be an interesting case study for what Disney chooses to do when Feige ultimately goes, yeah, I'm done here. There's nothing else for me to really push myself on a business level. Because Feige's a businessman. He's not going to work for Disney forever. He will look to eke out and go forwards and, you know, break new records elsewhere. So I do think that's interesting. I don't think Feige is the be-all and end-all of this. He's established tones and universes in both studios. It'll be really interesting to see how they take that moving forwards. Now he says, there is a lot of webbing here, but it all comes down to money, and it's easy to understand why both sides refuse to give ground. Disney asked that future Spider-Man films be a 50-50 co-financing arrangement between the studios. And there were discussions that this might extend to other films in the Spider-Man universe. Basically, Disney wanted to take over much more than they had before. Now, this is important, right? Sony turned that offer down flat, because sources said that Sony, led by Tom Rothman and Tony Vinciquerra, came back with other configurations, but Disney didn't want to do that. But Sony did not want to share its biggest franchise, naturally. Sure, Disney would be putting up half the funding, but the risk is how much you are going to make back in profit. This is where it comes down to Disney's fault. Disney wasn't at all interested in continuing the current terms where Marvel receives in the range of 5% of the first dollar gross. So they wanted to go from 5% to essentially 50%. Why would Sony agree to that? Why are we all hating on Sony? That's good business from Sony. It's good business decision. It's Disney's greed. How much has Disney made recently? How much? Billions. Why do they need a 50-50 split with Sony? It's just greed. Why are we hating on Sony for this? My mind is blown. My mind is blown. And all over Twitter, this was hilarious. I was reading up all these fucking Disney shills just going, it's Sony's fault. Sony, you just can't, you can't get it. It's your fault, blah, blah, blah. No. Disney wanted to go from a 5% to essentially a 50%. Why would Sony agree to that? Sony counter-offered. Disney didn't want to know. They literally said it's 50-50 or nothing. Sony, as per this report, counter-offered. So it was Disney that went there with a clear motive in mind. We're going to do this. It's this or nothing. Now, it's easy to say that Feige has enough on his plate, especially after taking control of the X-Men universe in the Fox acquisition, including the Deadpool franchise, along with architecting the next phase of the Marvel superhero universe and building movies and shows for Disney+. But I'm told Feige loves Spider-Man, arguably the biggest superhero character in the Marvel canon. He would have continued if Disney and Sony could have reached new deal terms, so he was happy. He was fine for doing it. But obviously he's got like an exclusivity deal, I would imagine. Now, essentially, this means that Sony will have to try and win a championship without Michael Jordan. After all, Feige's first decade at Marvel is largely embellished, and his consistency has been nothing short of historic. Even George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Peter Jackson haven't seen everything turn into a hit. And so, maybe only James Cameron has the success record that Feige has achieved. Not everything was a hit. Thor Dark World, come on now. But Feige has done it all in the last 10 years, producing and overseeing 23 superheroes with not a flop in the bunch. Again, Thor Dark World, what are you talking about? There have all been a number of one-openers that have collectively grossed $26.8 billion. Feige, this year, became the producer of the top-grossing film for two studios, Sony and Disney, and he produced 3 of the top 4 highest-grossing films this year in Avengers Endgame, Captain Marvel, and Spider-Man Far From Home. This, after scoring the first ever Best Picture Oscar nomination for a superhero film last year with Black Panther. I can't think of a Hollywood producer executive who's done anything close to this. So, it continues on, and the launch of the new iteration of Spider-Man has done brilliantly with Marvel's support and help. And yeah, I agree with that. But why would they do that? Now, this is where... So, sources said that Disney's top brass for the past couple of months has sought new terms for Feige and the Marvel cross-pollination to continue. As the Spider-Man relationship grew, Feige and Sony Pictures chief Tom Rothman spoke about the possibility of a wider involvement in the Sony-controlled Spider-Man universe, which contains 900 characters. It is understandable that the fiscally shrewd Rothman would balk at giving up half of Sony's biggest franchise to Marvel. After all, Marvel already owns the merchandising on Spider-Man, so again, it's just greed. Does the mouse really need half of the movie universe also? No, they don't. They've literally just argued that. They don't need it. Billions, 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 billions. Why are we hating on Sony for this? What the fuck? Sony so far has decided that as valuable as Feige is, Disney is asking too high a price. Sources said that Sony reasoned that they will be fine without Feige. The creative template has been set on the Spider-Man film, so kind of what I just said. And Watt and Holland are in place along with Amy Pascal, who became producer with Feige after she exited the executive suite after presiding over the previous Spider-Man iterations directed by Sam Raimi and Mark Webb as Sony Pictures chief. So sources also note that Venom was a problem picture and far from the polished product that grossed $856 million worldwide until Rothman himself spent a good long time in the editing room helping to get it there. So Rothman is clearly not an idiot. Now, I think this is interesting for a few reasons, right? We'll also read the updated report because those that reported on this earlier haven't got this report yet. Much of today's news about Spider-Man has mischaracterized recent discussions about Kevin Feige's involvement in the franchise. This is a direct response from Sony. We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision not to have him continue as a lead producer of our next live-action Spider-Man film. We hope this might change in the future, but understand that the many new responsibilities that Disney has given him, including all their newly added Marvel properties, do not allow time for him to work on an IP they do not own. Kevin is terrific, and we are grateful for his help and guidance and appreciate the path he has helped put us on, which we will continue. So again, perfectly professional. Sounds like they wanted to make a deal. Why are we all hating on Sony for this? I don't understand. Disney's absolute greed is what's stepped in here and caused nothing to happen. It's Disney's fault. The company that's been grossing billions. They want more. They want a 50-50 split. Why? Why do you need it? You don't. So anyway, there you go. That's the news. What do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. If you are new here, make sure you hit subscribe. You can stay up to date on the world of pop culture and movie news by hitting the bell notification icon. As always though, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like and a share. I've been Mr. H. Take care.